The camera shakes as Sarah's finger hovers over the bubble machine switch. Karen's entitled voice echoing from the backyard. It's just a dog. Get over it. But what Karen doesn't know is that her precious afternoon swim is about to become a sudsy nightmare and the whole neighborhood is watching. This isn't just about a pool anymore. This is she'd been in her home office, laptop balanced on her knees, when the familiar hum of her pool's filtration system suddenly stopped. Not the mechanical failure kind of stop, the something is very kind of stop, the kind that made her stomach drop and her fingers freeze over the keyboard. Sarah Chen had lived at 1247 Maple Grove for exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. She knew every sound her house made, the whistle of wind through the loose kitchen window, the gentle gurgle of the coffee maker at 6 a.m., and especially the steady, reassuring hum of her pool equipment. That pool had been her salvation after the divorce, her one indulgence in an otherwise carefully budgeted life. $28,000 of crystal-clear sanctuary where she swam laps every morning before work and floated with a book every evening. The silence stretched. Then came the splash. Sarah's head snapped up through her office window. She had a clear view of her backyard, and what she saw made her blood pressure spike instantly. A massive German shepherd was paddling enthusiastically across her pool, its thick coat already turning the pristine water a murky brown. Worse, standing at the pool's edge with her arms crossed and a satisfied smirk was Karen Mills from next door, still in her yoga pants and oversized sunglasses despite the late afternoon sun. Oh hell no. Sarah was on her feet before she'd finished the thought. She took the stairs 2 at a time, her bare feet slapping against the hardwood, and burst through the sliding door onto her deck. The scene was worse, up close. The German shepherd Brutus, she remembered Karen calling him, was not just swimming. He was having the time of his life, diving under the water and surfacing with pool toys in his mouth, shaking himself vigorously every few strokes, and sending waves crashing against the pool's edge. Sarah's voice cracked like a whip across the yard. What the hell do you think you're doing? Karen turned slowly, her expression shifting from satisfaction to feigned innocence. At 42, she had the kind of artificially enhanced features that screamed, "I demand to speak to your manager," overfilled lips, aggressively blonde hair, and the perpetually offended expression of someone who'd never been told no in her life. "Oh Sarah, I didn't know you were home." Karen's voice dripped with false sweetness. Brutus jumped the fence, and, well, it's such a hot day. He was just cooling off. Get him out now. Sarah's hands were shaking with rage. He's not supposed to be in my pool. Relax. It's just water. Karen waved dismissively. Dogs need to swim too, you know? It's good exercise. Sarah stared at her neighbor in disbelief. In the 3 years she'd lived here, Karen had been a constant source of irritation parking her SUV, so it blocked Sarah's driveway, letting her sprinkler system flood Sarah's garden, playing music loud enough to rattle windows until well past midnight. But this was different. This was a violation. Karen, I don't care if it's hot. I don't care if your dog needs exercise. This is my property, my pool, and you had no right. Oh please, don't be so dramatic. Karen's laugh was sharp and grating. It's not like he's hurting anything. You act like this pool is some kind of sacred temple or something. Sarah felt her composure cracking. That pool cost me nearly $30,000. It's chemically balanced, professionally maintained, and now your dog has turned it into a mud puddle. Do you have any idea what it's going to cost to clean? This may be if you weren't so uptight all the time, you'd realize it's not that big of a deal. Karen pulled out her phone and began scrolling through it, as if the conversation bored her. Besides, Brutus is cleaner than most people I know. That was it? Sarah had reached her breaking point. She'd been dealing with Karen's entitled behavior for years, always trying to be the bigger person, always swallowing her anger in the name of neighborly peace. But this was the last straw. Get your dog out of my pool right now, or I'm calling animal control and the police. Karen's head snapped up, her eyes flashing with anger. You wouldn't dare. Try me. For a moment, they stared at each other across the deck, the tension crackling between them like electricity. Brutus continued his joyful swim, oblivious to the war brewing above him. Finally, Karen let out an exaggerated sigh. Fine, Brutus, come on, she whistled sharply, but the dog ignored her, too busy retrieving a pool float shaped like a flamingo. Brutus out, she whistled again, louder this time. The dog's ears perked up, but he made no move toward the edge. Sarah watched in growing fury as Karen's commands became increasingly shrill and desperate. It was clear that despite her earlier bravado, she had about as much control over Brutus as she did over basic human decency. Maybe if you actually trained your dog instead of letting him run wild through the neighborhood, we wouldn't have this problem, Sarah said through gritted teeth. Don't you dare tell me how to raise my dog. Karen's mask of fake politeness finally slipped completely. At least I have a life beyond obsessing over every blade of grass and drop of water. Maybe if you spent less time being a control freak and more time actually living, you'd understand that sometimes things get a little messy. Messy. Sarah's voice rose to match Karen's. You call letting your untrained animal destroy someone else's property a little messy? It's a pool, Sarah. Water. It's not like he set fire to your precious perfect little life. The words hit like a slap. Karen knew exactly what buttons to push. Everyone in the neighborhood knew about Sarah's divorce, about how she'd lost the house in Seattle, about how she'd had to start over with nothing but her savings and a determination to build something stable and beautiful. You need to leave, Sarah said quietly, her voice deadly calm. Get your dog and get off my property. Or what? Karen stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You'll call your lawyer. Oh wait, that's right, you can't afford one anymore. The low blow hung in the air between them. Sarah felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. Different from anger. This was calculation. This was the moment she stopped caring about being the bigger person. You know what, Karen? You're right. I can't afford a lawyer, but I can afford something else. Sarah pulled out her phone and opened the camera app. I can afford to make sure everyone sees exactly who you really are. Karen's eyes widened as she realized what Sarah was doing. You put that phone away right now? Why? Afraid people might see the real Karen Mills. The one who thinks other people's property is her personal playground. Sarah raised the phone, framing Karen perfectly in the shot. Smile for the camera. Neighbor, I'm warning you. Are you threatening me now? On my own property. Sarah's finger moved to the record button. This just keeps getting better. Karen's face flushed red with rage. You think you're so smart, don't you? With your perfect little house and your perfect little life. But everyone knows the truth about you, Sarah. Everyone knows you're just a sad, bitter divorcee who has nothing better to do than spy on her neighbors and pick fights over nothing. Sarah hit record just as Karen's voice reached its most venomous pitch. Nothing. You call letting your dog destroy my pool nothing. It's just water. Karen shrieked, completely losing control now. It's just stupid. Chlorinated water in a concrete hole that you use to justify your pathetic existence. In the pool, Brutus finally seemed to sense the tension. He paddled toward the edge, but instead of climbing out, he decided this was the perfect moment to shake himself off while still in the water, sending a fresh wave of muddy spray across the deck and all over both women. Sarah wiped the dirty water from her face, looked down at her soaked clothes, then looked back at Karen, who was sputtering and dripping and looking absolutely furious, and something inside her snapped. Not toward anger this time, but toward something else entirely. Revenge. You know what, Karen? You're absolutely right. It is just water. Sarah's voice was suddenly calm, almost pleasant. Just water that I'm going to have to drain, scrub, and refill. Just water that's going to cost me about $500 in chemicals and cleaning supplies. Just water that's going to take up my entire weekend. Karen looked suspicious at Sarah's sudden change in tone. So you're finally being reasonable. Oh, I'm being very reasonable. Sarah smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Karen take a step back. In fact, I'm going to help you understand just how reasonable I can be. What's that supposed to mean? Sarah's smile widened. You'll see. Don't worry. I'll make sure you have a front row seat for the show. Something in Sarah's expression must have finally gotten through to Karen because she suddenly seemed eager to leave. Come on, Brutus. Out. This time, perhaps sensing his owner's genuine urgency, the German shepherd paddled to the pool's edge and hauled himself out, immediately shaking off and soaking everything within a 10-foot radius. This isn't over, Karen said as she grabbed Brutus's collar and started dragging him toward the fence line. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through possibilities, contingencies, and the delicious anticipation of what was to come. Every few minutes, she'd roll over and peer through her bedroom window at Karen's house, noting the patterns of light and movement. Karen's bedroom light stayed on until nearly 2 a.m., probably scrolling through social media. POSTING, passive-aggressive memes about difficult neighbors and drama queens. By 5:30 a.m., Sarah was up and moving with military precision. She made coffee, checked the weather forecast, sunny and hot, perfect, and opened her laptop to research. If she was going to do this, she was going to do it right. The bubble machine was more sophisticated than she'd initially realized. Professional grade, designed for theater productions and outdoor events, capable of producing massive quantities of long-lasting bubbles when paired with the right solution. The manual recommended a specific mixture ratio for maximum bubble density and persistence. Sarah drove to 3 different stores before 8 a.m., collecting supplies like a general preparing for battle. Industrial-grade bubble solution, backup containers, extension cords, waterproof timers, and in a moment of inspired vindication, a small wireless camera with motion detection. If Karen wanted to make a scene, Sarah was going to make sure it was properly documented. By the time she returned home, Karen's morning routine was in full swing. Sarah had studied her neighbor's schedule obsessively over the past 3 years. Not out of nosiness, but out of sheer necessity for self-preservation. Karen emerged every morning at exactly 7:45 a.m. to retrieve her newspaper. Wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly grocery budget, she'd stand on her front porch for exactly 3 minutes, surveying her domain like a queen inspecting her realm, before retreating inside. Then came the first cup of coffee on the back deck at 8:15. Followed by 20 minutes of loud phone calls to various service providers, demanding discounts or threatening to take her business elsewhere. By 9 a.m., she'd moved to her home office, where she ran some kind of online boutique selling overpriced jewelry to other suburban women with too much time and money. But the crucial window, Sarah's window, came at 2:30 p.m. Every single day. Without fail, Karen would emerge in her designer swimsuit and designer sunglasses, carrying her designer water bottle and designer towel, to lounge by her pool for exactly 90 minutes. She'd position her chair in the spot that caught the most sun and gave her the clearest view of the entire neighborhood, maintaining her post as the unofficial surveillance coordinator of Maple Grove. Sarah had always assumed Karen's afternoon poolside routine was about tanning and relaxation. Now she realized it was about power, the power to see everything, judge everything, and comment on everything happening in their little corner of suburbia. Today, that power dynamic was about to shift dramatically. Sarah spent the morning strategically positioning equipment. The bubble machine went behind her garden shed, connected to a heavy-duty extension cord that she carefully buried under mulch and decorative stones. The wireless camera found a perfect perch in her maple tree, angled to capture Karen's pool area without technically pointing into her house. The timer system was the most crucial element. She needed perfect synchronization to achieve maximum impact. At 11 a.m., her phone rang. The caller ID made her stomach clench. Mills. Karen. Hello, Karen. Sarah's voice was perfectly neutral, giving nothing away. Sarah, we need to talk. Karen's tone was different. Today is openly hostile, more calculated. About yesterday. What about it? Look, maybe we both got a little heated. These things happen between neighbors. I'm calling to see if we can work something out. Sarah nearly laughed. Of course Karen wanted to work something out now. She'd probably spent the night realizing that her tantrum had been recorded, that there might be consequences for once in her entitled life. What kind of something did you have in mind? Well, I could pay for the pool cleaning. I mean, it's not like Brutus really damaged anything, but if it makes you feel better. The condescension in Karen's voice was unmistakable. Even her apology was designed to make Sarah feel unreasonable for being upset in the first place. That's generous of you, Sarah said carefully. What about the chemicals, the filtration system, maintenance, the time I'll have to take off work to supervise the cleaning? Don't you think you're being a little dramatic? It's just water, Sarah finished. Right, you mentioned that yesterday. There was a pause. Karen was clearly trying to gauge Sarah's mood, to figure out whether her damage control mission was working. So are we good then? Karen asked. I'll have someone come clean the pool this week, and we can put this whole silly thing behind us. Sarah looked out her window at the bubble machine, hidden and ready. You know what, Karen? I think we're better than good. I think we understand each other perfectly now. Great. I'm so glad we could work this out like adults. I knew you'd be reasonable once you had time to think about it. The casual dismissal in Karen's tone confirmed everything Sarah had suspected. This wasn't an apology, it was damage control. Karen wasn't sorry. She was just trying to neutralize a potential threat to her reputation. Absolutely, Sarah agreed. In fact, I'm planning a little something special for this afternoon, a celebration of our new understanding. Oh, Karen sounded curious but cautious. What kind of celebration? You'll see. I think you're really going to enjoy it. After hanging up, Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she'd had during her divorce proceedings, when her ex-husband's lawyer had tried to paint her as the unreasonable party, the same feeling she'd had when her former boss had passed her over for promotion, while promoting a less qualified male colleague, the same feeling she'd been swallowing for years in the name of keeping the peace. But today was different. Today she wasn't swallowing anything. At 1 p.m., Sarah positioned herself at her kitchen window with a cup of tea and her phone. The wireless camera was transmitting perfectly to her device, giving her a crystal-clear view of Karen's pool area. She'd already tested the bubble machine. Twice it worked like a dream, producing thick clouds of iridescent bubbles that danced on the breeze for minutes before finally popping. At 1:45 she activated the timer system. Everything was synchronized, calibrated, and ready. At 2:15, Sarah saw Karen emerge from her sliding door, right on schedule. Designer swimsuit, designer sunglasses, designer everything. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who'd never faced real consequences for her actions, who'd never had to truly consider how her behavior affected other people. Karen arranged her chair with characteristic precision, angling it for maximum sun exposure and optimal neighborhood surveillance. She settled in with her phone and her water bottle, completely unaware that she was about to become the star of her own humiliation. Sarah watched Karen scroll through her phone, probably checking social media, maybe posting something about her beautiful afternoon by the pool. The irony was delicious. At exactly 2:30 p.m., Sarah's timer activated. The bubble machine roared to life with the subtle hum of its powerful motor. Within seconds, the first wave of bubbles began emerging from behind Sarah's garden shed, catching the afternoon breeze perfectly. They rose and multiplied, creating an ever-expanding cloud of soap-scented spheres that drifted lazily across the property line. Sarah held her breath, watching Karen's reaction through the camera feed. At first, Karen didn't notice. She was too absorbed in her phone, too comfortable in her routine of afternoon dominance. The first few bubbles that landed in her pool barely registered just random spots of foam on the water's surface. But bubbles have a way of multiplying exponentially, and Sarah's machine was just getting started. Within minutes, what started as a few wayward bubbles became a steady stream, then a flood. The professional-grade solution Sarah had researched created bubbles that were larger, longer-lasting, and more resistant to popping than ordinary soap bubbles. They accumulated on Karen's pool surface like a growing foam party, transforming the crystal-clear water into something that looked like a giant bubble bath. Karen's head snapped up from her phone. She stared at her pool in confusion, then looked around to identify the source of the sudden bubble invasion. Her gaze swept the yard, the sky, the neighboring properties, but the machine was perfectly hidden behind Sarah's shed. What the hell? Karen's voice carried clearly across the yard. Sarah smiled and zoomed in with her camera, capturing every detail of Karen's growing bewilderment and frustration. Karen stood up and walked to the edge of her pool, poking at the accumulating foam with her toe. More bubbles continued to arrive, carried by the perfect afternoon breeze, coating everything in their path. Her pool furniture, her carefully arranged towels, her designer water bottle, everything was getting a light coating of soap-scented spheres. "This is ridiculous," Karen muttered, looking around more frantically now. She pulled out her phone and started dialing. Sarah's phone buzzed. She looked at the caller ID and grinned. "Hello, Karen. How's your afternoon going?" "Sarah, there are bubbles everywhere. They're coming from somewhere in your yard, and they're ruining my pool time. You need to turn off whatever machine you're running." "Machine? I'm not running any machine. I'm just sitting in my kitchen, having some tea." "Done?" She stumbled to her bedroom window, still groggy from the best night's sleep she'd had in months, and peered through the blinds. What she saw made her instantly, completely awake. A massive truck was parked in Karen's driveway, its logo reading, "Premium Pool and Landscaping Services." 3 men in matching polo shirts were unloading equipment that looked like it belonged on a construction site rather than in a suburban backyard. Sarah grabbed her phone and checked the time. 6:47 a.m. was starting her revenge campaign before most of the neighborhood was even awake. She threw on clothes and crept out to her back deck, trying to get a better view of what Karen was planning. Through the fence slats, she could see the crew setting up what appeared to be industrial-grade pool cleaning equipment. Not the gentle vacuum and skimmer setup that Sarah had been expecting, but serious machinery that was already generating a low, persistent hum. One of the workers approached Karen, who had emerged in a silk robe and an expression of grim satisfaction. Sarah couldn't hear their conversation, but she could see Karen gesturing emphatically towards Sarah's house, while the worker nodded and took notes. This wasn't about cleaning Karen's pool. This was about making Sarah's life miserable. The hum grew louder as more equipment came online. By 7 a.m., the noise was constant and invasive, not quite loud enough to violate noise ordinances, but definitely loud enough to make concentration impossible. Sarah tried to work from her home office, but the persistent mechanical drone made it impossible to focus on her computer screen or take client calls. By 8 a.m., her phone was ringing. It was Mrs. Patterson from across the street, her voice tight with irritation. "Do you know what's going on over at Ron's? That noise is driving me crazy, and I can't even see what they're doing from my house. Pool cleaning, apparently," Sarah said, watching through her window as one of the workers powered up what looked like a pressure washer on steroids. Very thorough pool cleaning. At 7 in the morning, on a Wednesday, before Sarah could respond, her call waiting beeped. Then again, within 10 minutes, she'd fielded calls from 5 different neighbors, all asking about the noise, all sounding increasingly annoyed. Karen's plan was backfiring. Instead of making Sarah suffer in isolation, she was turning the entire neighborhood against herself. But Karen wasn't done. At 9 a.m., a second truck arrived. This one belonged to Emerald Lawn Care Specialist, and it brought with it an array of landscaping equipment that made the pool cleaning machinery sound like a whisper. Leaf blowers, hedge trimmers, and what appeared to be a small wood chipper filled Karen's driveway. Sarah realized with growing amazement that Karen was having her entire backyard renovated as an excuse to create maximum noise and disruption. It was actually brilliant in its pettiness, she could claim. She was just improving her property while making Sarah's life unbearable. The noise level increased exponentially. Sarah had to close all her windows and move to her basement office, just to hear herself think. But even there, the sound penetrated a constant reminder that Karen Mills was not going to accept defeat gracefully. At 10:30, Sarah's doorbell rang. She climbed the stairs from her basement, opened the front door, and found herself faced with a woman in a crisp business suit holding an official-looking folder. "Miss Chen, I'm Janet Rodriguez from the city planning office. I need to speak with you about some complaints we've received regarding your property." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What kind of complaints? May I come in?" They sat in Sarah's living room while Janet opened her folder and pulled out several forms. "We've received reports of unauthorized chemical discharge, potential environmental hazards, and the operation of commercial equipment without proper permits." "I'm sorry, what?" "According to the complaint, you've been discharging large quantities of soap-based chemicals into the air and neighboring properties. potentially contaminating water sources and creating safety hazards for children and pets. Janet's voice was professional, but sympathetic. The complainant also alleges that you're operating commercial bubble-making equipment without the required permits for home business activities. Sarah stared at the paperwork in disbelief. You're talking about bubble solution, the kind they sell at toy stores for making bubbles. I understand this may seem excessive, but we have to investigate all complaints. The city takes environmental and safety concerns very seriously. Who filed the complaint? Janet glanced at her paperwork. Karen Mills, 1249 Maple Grove Drive. Of course, Sarah should have seen this coming. Karen couldn't fight the bubbles directly, so she was using bureaucracy as a weapon. Ms. Rodriguez, I used a bubble machine yesterday for about an hour. The kind parents buy for birthday parties. The solution was non-toxic, biodegradable bubble mixture that you can buy at any grocery store. There's no environmental hazard, no commercial operation, and definitely no safety risk to anyone. Janet looked relieved. Do you have documentation for the equipment and the solution you used? Sarah spent the next 20 minutes digging up receipts, product specifications, and safety data sheets for everything she'd used. Janet reviewed each document carefully, taking notes and photos. This all looks perfectly legitimate, Janet finally said. The bubble solution is FDA approved for children's toys. The machine is designed for home use, and you operated it on your own property. I don't see any violations here, so the complaint is dismissed. I'll file my report, but yes, there's clearly no merit to the allegations. Janet paused, glancing toward the sound of machinery still running next door. Between you and me, this looks like a neighbor dispute that got out of hand. We see it more often than you'd think. After Janet left, Sarah stood in her living room, listening to the ongoing cacophony from Karen's backyard and feeling a familiar rage building in her chest. But this time, the anger was different, colder, more focused. Karen wasn't just being petty anymore. She was actively trying to use government agencies to harass Sarah, to create real legal and financial problems for her. This had moved beyond neighbor drama into something potentially damaging to Sarah's reputation and livelihood. Sarah walked to her window and looked out at Karen's backyard, where the landscaping crew was now using what appeared to be a jackhammer to remove perfectly good concrete from around Karen's pool. The noise was absolutely deafening. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Having fun yet? Sarah stared at the message, then at the chaos in Karen's yard, then at the city complaint paperwork still spread across her coffee table. Karen thought she was winning. She thought bureaucratic harassment and noise torture would make Sarah back down, apologize, and return to being the quiet, compliant neighbor she'd always been. Karen was wrong. Sarah opened her laptop and began researching. If Karen wanted to play with official complaints and city regulations, Sarah was happy to join that game. But unlike Karen, Sarah was going to do her homework first. 3 hours later, Sarah had a comprehensive understanding of every city ordinance related to noise, construction permits, business licenses, and environmental regulations. More importantly, she had a clear picture of exactly how many rules. Karen was currently breaking the construction noise ordinance prohibited power equipment before 8 a.m. and after 6 p.m. Karen's crew had started at 6:47 a.m. Major landscaping projects required permits and inspections. Karen hadn't filed any paperwork with the city. The wood chipper they were using required special handling permits for residential areas. The landscaping company didn't have them, and most damning of all, the pressure washing equipment they were using was discharging runoff directly into the storm drain system, a serious environmental violation that carried substantial fines. Sarah documented everything with photos and timestamps, then carefully filled out her own complaint forms. But she didn't submit them immediately. Instead, she saved them as ammunition for later. Because Sarah had realized something important. Karen was escalating, but she was also getting sloppy. Desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. At 2 p.m., the landscaping crew took a lunch break, and the blessed silence felt like a physical relief. Sarah was finally able to think clearly again, to plan her next move. She was interrupted by her doorbell. This time, it was Diane, Karen's friend from the day before. She looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with her designer purse and avoiding eye contact. Hi, Diane said awkwardly. I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I'm Diane. I was here yesterday when Diana was hurt in Bubbles. I remember. What can I do for you? Could we talk privately? Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside to let Diane in. They sat in the same chairs where Sarah had met with the city inspector that morning. I need to ask you something, Diane said, still not quite meeting Sarah's eyes. Did Karen really let her dog swim in your pool? Sarah studied Diane's face carefully. She didn't tell you. She told me you were crazy, that you attacked her for no reason. But yesterday, with the bubbles, I could tell there was more to the story, and today, with all this, Diane gestured toward the sound of machinery starting up again next door. This isn't like Karen. I mean, it is like Karen, but not to this extent. Not unless she did something really bad first. Sarah made a decision. She pulled out her phone and showed Diane the video from 2 days ago. Karen's rant about not a hasty, emotion-driven retaliation, but a surgical strike of bureaucratic precision that would dismantle Karen's entire offensive while exposing her to consequences she'd never imagined. By 3 a.m., Sarah had submitted 17 separate complaints to various city departments, each one meticulously documented with timestamps, photos, and video evidence. Noise violations, unpermitted construction, environmental discharge infractions, false reporting to city officials, operating commercial equipment without licenses. Each complaint was a separate thread that, when pulled together, would unravel Karen's entire position. But Sarah's masterpiece was the formal response to Karen's demand letter, a document that Karen had requested to be properly documented and copied to appropriate legal authorities. Sarah was about to give her exactly that. At 6 a.m., while Karen's construction crew was setting up for another day of noise torture, Sarah's printer worked overtime. Official complaint forms, environmental violation reports, legal response documents, and a particularly devastating piece of correspondence that would arrive by certified mail later that morning. The doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m. Sarah opened the door to find 3 different city inspectors standing on her porch: Janet Rodriguez from planning, a stern-looking man with a noise compliance badge, and a woman in environmental services coveralls, carrying what appeared to be water testing equipment. "Ms. Chen," Janet said, looking slightly embarrassed, "we received your complaints early this morning. Given the number and severity of the allegations, we're conducting an immediate investigation, of course. Would you like to start with the noise violations?" As if summoned by cosmic timing, the construction crew next door fired up their equipment. At that exact moment, a full 37 minutes before the legal start time for power tools in residential areas, the noise compliance officer winced and immediately pulled out a decibel meter. "Yeah, we can start with that." For the next 2 hours, Sarah's front yard became command central for a multi-department investigation. The noise officer documented sound levels that exceeded city limits by substantial margins. The environmental inspector discovered that Karen's pressure washing operation was indeed discharging soapy runoff directly into storm drains, a violation that carried automatic fines of $2,500 per occurrence. Most damning of all, the planning inspector found that Karen's landscaping project required permits that she hadn't obtained, involved work that wasn't approved for her property's zoning classification, and was being performed by contractors who lacked proper residential licensing. "This is a mess," Janet muttered, reviewing her growing stack of violation notices. "The neighbors looking at serious fines here. Plus, we'll have to shut down the construction immediately." At 9:45 a.m., an official city truck pulled up in front of Karen's house. 3 inspectors walked up her driveway and began what Sarah could only describe as the most satisfying conversation she'd ever witnessed from a distance. Karen emerged in her silk robe, clearly expecting to charm her way through what she probably assumed was a routine inspection. Sarah watched through her window as Karen's confident smile gradually transformed into confusion, then alarm, then full-blown panic as the violations were explained to her. The construction crew began packing up their equipment. Work orders were handed out, official notices were taped to Karen's front door, and then came the certified mail. Sarah had timed the delivery perfectly. At exactly 10 a.m., while Karen was still arguing with the city inspectors in her driveway, the Postal Service truck arrived with Sarah's legal response. Through her window, Sarah watched Karen sign for the certified letter, rip it open with aggressive confidence, and then watch her face go through several fascinating emotional transformations as she read Sarah's carefully crafted reply. The document was a masterpiece of polite legal language that systematically dismantled every claim in Karen's demand letter while presenting an alternative narrative, supported by irrefutable evidence. Sarah had included timestamps of Karen's noise violations, photos of environmental infractions, copies of the city inspector's clearance from the previous day, and most devastating of all, screenshots from Karen's own threatening video that clearly showed her making false accusations that had already been officially disproven. But the real coup de grace was Sarah's counter-demand: $8,000 in damages for harassment, lost work productivity due to illegal noise violations, stress and inconvenience caused by false complaints to city officials, and reimbursement for the time and resources Sarah had been forced to expend defending herself against baseless accusations. Sarah had also included a helpful addendum explaining that filing false reports with city agencies was a misdemeanor offense, punishable by fines and potential jail time, and that all of Karen's communications had been preserved as evidence should legal action become necessary. The letter concluded with an offer of amnesty if Karen agreed to cease all harassing behavior, comply with city ordinances, and provide a written apology. Sarah would be willing to withdraw her complaints and consider the matter closed. The reaction was visible from space. She crumpled the letter, threw it on the ground, then apparently thought better of it and scrambled to pick it up again. She stormed over to the city inspectors, waving the document and clearly demanding they do something about Sarah's outrageous response. The inspectors, who who had just finished writing Karen up for multiple serious violations, were notably unsympathetic to her new complaints about her neighbor's harassment. At 10:30, Sarah's phone rang. "You think you're so smart?" Karen's voice was shrill with rage. "But this isn't over. I have lawyers. I have connections. You can't just destroy someone's life because of a few stupid bubbles." "Karen," Sarah said, calmly, "I didn't destroy anything. You did that yourself when you decided to escalate a simple neighbor dispute into a campaign of harassment and false accusations." "False accusations. Your bubble attack was legal, non-toxic, and conducted entirely on my own property using consumer-grade equipment," Sarah interrupted. "Unlike your construction project, which is being shut down as we speak for multiple code violations, that's different. I was improving my property, without permits, using unlicensed contractors, creating noise violations, discharging pollutants into city water systems." Sarah's voice remained perfectly calm. The city inspector seemed very interested in the environmental violations. Apparently those come with automatic fines. There was silence on the other end of the line. "I offered you a reasonable solution," Sarah continued. "Comply with city ordinances, stop the harassment, apologize for your behavior, and we can put this behind us. The alternative is that I pursue every legal remedy available to me." "You wouldn't dare, Karen. You literally filmed yourself making false accusations and then sent me the video as evidence. You filed fake environmental complaints that waste city resources. You've been violating noise ordinances for 2 days while threatening me with legal action. I don't need to dare anything. You've already done all the work for me." The line went quiet except for the sound of Karen's heavy breathing. "One more thing," Sarah added. "Diane stopped by yesterday. She wanted to know the truth about what really happened. I showed her the video of your pool tantrum. You had no right," she asked, just like Mrs. Patterson asked about the noise, and Mr. Jenkins asked about the environmental violations. Funny how people want to know the truth when their neighborhood gets disrupted. Sarah could practically hear Karen's blood pressure spiking through the phone. "You have until 5 p.m. today to decide," Sarah said. "Take the reasonable offer, or see how this plays out in court. Your choice." She hung up. For the next several hours, Sarah watched the chaos unfold in Karen's backyard. The construction crew finished packing up and left, taking their noise with them. City inspectors continued arriving throughout the day, documenting violations and issuing citations. Karen spent most of the time on her phone, presumably calling lawyers and trying to find someone who would tell her she was the victim in this situation. At 3 p.m., Diane's BMW pulled into Karen's driveway one last time. Sarah couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see it escalating quickly. Diane gestured toward the pile of violation notices taped to Karen's door, toward Sarah's house, and finally toward Karen herself with the kind of sharp, angry movements that suggested she was done enabling her friend's behavior. The conversation ended with Diane getting back in her car and driving away while Karen stood in her driveway, hands on her hips, watching her last ally abandon ship. At 4:45 p.m., Sarah's doorbell rang. She opened the door to find Karen standing on her porch, looking deflated and exhausted. Gone was the designer swimsuit and artificial confidence. This was a woman who had finally run out of escalation options. "I want to talk," Karen said quietly. They sat in Sarah's living room, the same space where this morning's city inspectors had reviewed violation reports and where yesterday Diane had learned the truth about her friend's behavior. "How much?" Karen asked without preamble. "How much?" "What? To make this go away? The complaints? The fines? All of it? How much do you want?" Sarah studied Karen's face. Even in defeat, she was still trying to buy her way out of consequences rather than accept responsibility for her actions. "I told you this morning, comply with